Here I am once again um, in the churchyard of Holy Trinity Church in Buckfastleigh, and this morning I want to reflect on my work with men and my identity as a man, and what that means to me personally, and what that means for so many men in our culture. I arrived here a few minutes ago and an elderly man drove up and parked his car right in front of me and very politely asked if he was in my way. And I said no, and asked him if he was visiting the graveyard, and he said, yes, I'm coming to see my daughter. And yeah, in that moment I was struck by the tragedy of a parent losing a child and don't know anything about this man's story or the story of his daughter, but just left with such a sense of how much all humans carry in the realm of grief and sadness, and just how, for men more so than women in my judgment, in our culture there is a prohibition on expressing strong feelings. I think it's a universal trait of our culture that strong feelings are pushed down and hidden away, and that we don't have a healthy culture of grief, coming together to grieve together regularly. And I think that men more so than women are trapped, the parts of them that feel deeply and strongly feelings of profound sadness and the whole spectrum of feelings, because when we dampen down those feelings that we judge to be negative, like anger and sadness, then the feelings that we judge to be positive are also circumscribed and dampened. Joy and happiness and excitement. Yeah, we end up suppressing all of that and can live our lives in a state of numbness. And that was certainly my experience for many years. I got to a stage in my life where I didn't think that I was capable of love. I didn't think that I could find love within me, because of this sense of numbness and nothingness that I experienced when I really stopped and checked in with myself beneath the alcohol and the other stimulants that I was and still am to a certain extent a regular taker of. There wasn't much going on emotionally, and that led to me going from relationship to relationship to relationship, seeking an experience of love and being loved, but not having the capacity to reciprocate. And that was because I was so shut down. And the journey of returning from that has been long and perilous, and there have been tragedies along the way and losses, and the realization that relationships that I believed were in service to me and to others were not. Um, I suppose I'm sharing all of this because I have a deep love of men, and I've been working with men for 10 years as a facilitator of men's groups, and in that time I have never met a man who has not had a beautiful heart that opens up under the right conditions, and often those conditions are amongst other men. I've also spent a lot of time in workshops that have been dominated by women. Perhaps dominated isn't quite the right word, where there has been many more women than there are men, so often the only man in a group of women, and for a while that made me feel kind of special. But once I began to dig into what was going on underneath that, I realised that it was intimidating and alienating to be alone as a man amongst a group of women, and began to realise that the reason that so many men who are interested in personal development work, working on themselves in that way, the reason they don't tend to find themselves attracted to these spaces, these personal development spaces and workshops, is because they will be in a minority, and that is not conducive to authentic sharing as a man. The risk of sharing deeply and truthfully all of the shit and the stuff that lies under the surface of our often very flatline presentations, the risk of sharing that in a space where that might be judged or misunderstood or misconstrued by women is huge. There's a huge risk in that, a huge vulnerability, and it's often just not something which many men will consider, for good reason, because there's a lot of judgment out there of men, and as someone who has grown up with 5 brothers, I suppose that there's a sense of familiarity and camaraderie that I feel amongst men, although for many years I had to battle with part of me that was still wounded from being bullied for quite a few years as a teenager, to work through that, to come into a place of trust, actually, of other men as well. And this is the reason why these men's spaces can be so powerful, is that they provide an opportunity for us to slowly come back into a place of trust of our brothers, of other men, to recognize that other men are not our competitors, they're our brothers, and they've got our back. Of course, it's not quite as simple as that, because a lot of men are competitive, a lot of people are competitive, and those kinds of dynamics also exist in men's spaces. It would be unrealistic to imagine that they wouldn't, because there's something quite natural about that kind of competitiveness. But there's also another side. There's a side of men with huge hearts and huge love and huge amounts of time for one another. I established a new men's group here in South Devon a few months ago, with a friend, and in that process I realised just how many men there are around here who are looking for a group of men to circle up with, but not finding one. And it really landed with me how much I want to support these men to find spaces where they can share honestly and vulnerably, and to be doing their work, uh, in order to bring our culture back into a greater sense of balance with respect to the way that men show up for each other and for their partners. And so I've decided to offer mentoring for men who are interested in setting up a group to support themselves. There's a number of quite straightforward steps which I have followed on this occasion, setting up a really lovely successful group here in South Devon, establishing a group in Sussex 10 years ago which was successful for 10 years, working with a band of brothers, being a part of that organisation for a number of years. I've learnt a lot about working with men and what's needed to support a group of men, what structures are needed, what processes, and want to seed other men's groups as part of my work. So if that's of interest to anyone, if that's of interest to you, if you're watching this, then please get in touch. I think that a 6-week program of one-to-one sessions of mentoring to support you to have the confidence to reach out to people locally and find out if they're interested in joining a group, and going through the process of setting that up, and what might be needed, and what barriers might be in the way of you stepping forward in leadership in order to facilitate and to get other members of the group to step forward as well into leadership. And I think that's the key for me, is that creating spaces of accountability and equality, the understanding that we're all leaders, that we all have leadership gifts to bring in our own different ways, and spaces that really foster and encourage those gifts through support, through care, through love, through challenge, through dealing with the shadow that inevitably comes up in these groups, the kind of way in which conflict is dealt with. These are things which are really, really important for the health and thriving of a group, and they're things that we can discuss and explore in our sessions together. So get in touch if you're interested in having that kind of a conversation, and we'll see where it leads. Go well and enjoy this beautiful weather.